All right. Mic check. I'm good. So I'm Max Duran. CWB Association Welding podcast. Today we have a really cool guest. Welding podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. This is yet another fantastic special series that we are doing with Skills National across Canada. Here we are interviewing NAC members from the alumni committees across this beautiful country that work with Skills Canada. And today we have Sam Turgeon-Brabazon. Turgeon like Dijon is what he just told me, and I think I still screwed it up. Sam, how's it going?
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. It's great to be here.
Good, Sam. So let's start with a little bit of backstory. We know each other. We've hung out before.
We do. Yeah.
So when did we meet? When did we last hang out?
So as I remember it, the last time that we hung out was at the last Skills Canada National Convention in Vancouver of last year. It was a really memorable occasion. I really loved it. Great chatting with you then, and no doubt still going to be great chatting with you here.
Yeah, it was a fun time. It was out in the Nationals in Vancouver. Beautiful setup there in the wonderful conference center. It was huge. And that was just coming out of COVID. Like, I mean, that was, I think, unexpectedly big.
That was it. Yeah, no, same with me. It was actually my first conference that I had been to since 2020, if you can believe it. So I'm, in addition to wearing a couple different hats at the same time, one of the other hats that I tend to wear is being a caregiver for my grandmother. So we've had to lock down pretty hard in Ottawa, but it was great to just be back and see everybody. And everybody on the National Alumni Committee was so supportive to, needing to don a mask sometimes too. So it was just great to see that everyone was in a good space, and it was a really collaborative, team-based environment.
Yeah, and then, one of my favorite thing about conferences is the ad hoc meetings after, when you just come across groups of people and you go out for a meal and a drink and the conversations, and you were able to tag in on a little group session that we went out with and with a couple of other skills members, and man, we had an awesome time. Great conversation.
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, no, it's fantastic. That's the thing that really comes across every time that we have a skills related event. Everybody from a bunch of different backgrounds are present, and it seems like we always have, never a shortage of things to talk about. So it's one of the things that I love most.
The networking, really, like the networking, it's like the flavor of life. And I really feel for the people that are really introverted and struggle getting out, because it is such a beautiful thing to have like-minded people get together and relax,
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Plus it's fun too when you're able to talk to people who just, genuinely love talking, but also genuinely love listening too. Like that's the thing that I love. It's great to be able to share your own story and to share your piece, but part of the reason why it's great to be in dialogue with people is to learn from the other people that you're there with, right? So it's great how those sorts of things always seem to shine through well with skills.
So we're going to now start back at the start, because we're going to end up back at 2020 or 2021, whatever it was, in Vancouver. But, Sam, you yourself live in Ottawa. Is that where you live right now?
That's correct, yeah.
And did you grow up, were you raised in Ottawa? Is this your hometown?
It's my hometown. Yeah, it's the only place that I've ever known. I've done some traveling here and there, of course, but yeah, I'm Ottawa born and raised.
So, there's got to be a little bit of a connection between you growing up in, government town to your interest in government. Do you feel that this is a geographical influence, or was it maybe family influence, or, what do your parents do? What is it that made you kind of head into the career we're about to start talking about?
Well, it was really interesting. I think everybody has their own career path, and it tends to at least hopefully speak to their sort of raison d'être, like who they are as a person. For me, ever since I was a kid, I've really genuinely only wanted to have a positive impact on my community. And then being in Ottawa, at a really young age, I always saw government as a really great way to have that positive impact. So coming out of high school, I had the privilege of being a page at the House of Commons in my first year of uni, which was really fantastic. And I got to sort of see the inner workings of how politics happens, at least on a federal front in Ottawa. Yeah. And having those learnings happening at the same time as when I was also being more and more involved with skills was really cool, because from the skills perspective, I was able to sort of start to dip my toes into the waters of government relations and some elements of labor advocacy and those sorts of things. While at the same point, studying public policy and working on the Hill was really great to see, how politics happens in a more macro way. So yeah, no, I've always loved government. I've now moved a little bit away from the government path. I'm more into the private sector now, which has brought with it its own challenges and opportunities that I've loved. But yeah, no, for sure, I've definitely lived and breathed the government path for quite a long time being in Ottawa.
You drank the juice, buddy. You drank
That's
the juice. So let's talk about what your involvement was at Skills. So, I have on my sheet here that you competed in the workplace safety competition. Now, I guess let's start to the first time that happened. How old were you? Where were you that when you first got that bug put in your ear of, hey, first of all, this competition exists, secondly, there's a piece of this that is workplace safety. And then the third part is why you? How did you end up in that competition?
So it's a great question. I first ended up finding out about skills through a school guidance counselor, actually, funny enough, at my high school. And she said, look, we're trying to find people for the skills competition that's going to be coming up in Waterloo. You seem to have a real love and a real passion for, I was really into labor rights and human rights for a long time. So they made a logical connection between labor rights and human rights and workplace safety. And said, you should really maybe put your hat in the ring and give it a go to try out in the workplace safety competition in 2015. So that was how I initially heard about Skills. I'm so grateful to that guidance counselor for having shared it with me, because she actually ended up becoming my coach when I was going through the training process for Skills. And then I went on to the Waterloo competition. I was 18, and it was the first time that I had been in any sort of a competition of that size. As I understand it, I believe that was also the first time that someone in my school board had ever gone on to win gold, which they ended up doing,
awesome.
Which is really sort of amazing. And so then that was in 2015. Also happened to be the same year that I was going to be graduating from my high school. And I had this really interesting, very privileged all the same, but very interesting decision to make between, do I go on to nationals in Saskatoon that year, or do I stay back and go to prom? Because it just so happened that prom and nationals were happening the same day. So
that's tough. That's tough.
It was a tough trade-off, but at the same point, though, it felt good to know, that nationals is so much bigger than just me. It's also about, being able to represent my school board, and ultimately my province. So felt good making that decision to go to Saskatoon and compete, and then being able to say that I won gold at that competition too was a really sort of Cinderella story ending to the whole process.
So you were gold provincial and then gold national.
That's correct. Yeah. So
if you would have come back from Saskatoon with a medal of excellence, then perhaps prom would have been the better choice.
Who knows? I mean, it was still a really great experience all the same. But actually, it was really nice too, because one of my teachers who were at the prom, they actually brought like their phone around on FaceTime, so I still got to feel like I was there. I remember
cute.
I was in like a side room, and that was kind of awesome. But everybody was really supportive, and we had a big party when I got back anyway, so I still felt the party life and whatnot.
So let's back up to that grade 12 year when they're like, hey, there's this thing, you're really into advocacy, you're into this public forum, and one of your guidance counselor connects the dots and says, what about workplace safety? But there's other parts. There's like, public speaking, there's other areas, why workplace safety? And for the listeners, like, what is workplace safety as a competition? Like, do you throw 10 people in a room and see who gets hurt first, and that's your fault? Or, how is it that you can create a competition out of something that seems so theoretical?
It's a great question. And it was actually one of the things that I was wondering myself too in grade 12 when I was going into it. I thought, okay, well, I really want to make sure that I perform really well and I study in a really good way. So that was also something that I was really curious about too. It ended up being really, I don't want to say straightforward, but it was really easy to study for, in that it was very logic based. So we were put into a room. There were a series of different hazards that were present in that room, and then we had to go and identify all the hazards and then relate it back to the public policies that were outlined in the regulations on why that was not allowed to have that specific hazard in place. And so then we just went through and with our clipboards and made sure that we identified all the key hazards and gave the rationale as to how we would mitigate those hazards in the future. I suppose the person with the highest point score ended up winning from that. But that was what the competition was like. In terms of what drew me to workplace safety as a practice. So, like I mentioned, human rights, labor rights, always something that's been really important to me. So my personal connection to workplace safety, when I was in grade 9, in my high school, there was a really terrible explosion in the auto shop class at my high school. And it actually ended up resulting in one of my student colleagues passing away. It was really sad. And I was there on the day that it all happened. And I saw, the first responders arriving. In some cases, actually, some other teachers and students ended up rushing into the auto shop before the first responders even got there. And living through that, granted, of course, still with a huge amount of privilege of not being in the class myself, but I really wanted to do something meaningful to make sure that that wouldn't happen again if I had any sort of ability to influence that. So I thought that this competition, especially when my guidance counselor brought it to my attention, was going to be a really great way to sort of really walk the walk on that front. And then in the future, ever since, I've been really grateful to have gone on to study public policy. And that was one of my initial guiding reasons for choosing public policy as an educational path, was to understand, okay, well, how do governments write the policies that protect workers? And then how can we figure out how to do that a little bit better to make sure that more workers come home at the end of their shift?
It is such a fine line between governance and restriction in terms of public policy. The saying is as old as age, as you are going back thousands of years, but all policies written in blood. Things don't tend to change till it's too late, because then it's like, okay, now it has to. But if you change it before the blood, then people are saying, why aren't you letting me be free? So it's a very, very tough line to walk. When you look at it as a person from your background and, experiencing an accident affects you. I've experienced a couple terrible workplace tragedies, and it does put your hat of safety on, because you don't want not yourself to go through that, but anyone to go through that, because it sucks. But you also want to give people the freedom to work and to work as hard as they can and contribute as much as they can, which does, you do teeter on that razor edge. Now, from your point of view, stepping into this workplace safety spectrum, or, through the lens of it, how do you navigate that? How do you just say, you know what, everyone just wear, foam suits and helmets and wear gloves 24/7, even if you're just cooking a chicken in the microwave, then you'll never get hurt. 100%, you'll never get hurt. But now that takes away so much of the ability to do anything well, right?
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah, and I think that's a line that governments are often trying to figure out how to best navigate. And I certainly trust the experts in being able to figure out how to write those policies in the best way that's based on evidence and based on the most clear rationales that they have at the time that they're writing them. I would say, from my perspective, everybody wins when we have good, well drafted, well implemented, and well monitored workplace safety policies. It means that workers in those workplaces that would otherwise be unsafe are able to feel comfortable knowing that they can report when they feel unsafe, and then can step away from work that could otherwise put their health in jeopardy, or could risk their lives, which ultimately will make sure that they can have a more productive workday if they're not needing to worry so much about their own health and safety. And then also ultimately, for the bottom line of a company, if they know that their workers are going to be able to come back to work the day after, and day after day, then it means that ultimately it helps the bottom line too. So the trade-off that's often drawn between okay, well, if we have really stringent and rigorous workplace safety policies, that's going to end up resulting in a decrease of employee productivity. I don't think that that's really what we've actually seen in practice, which is, at least from my experience, which I'm actually really pleasantly surprised about. I think that it shows that we're able to have both, with that fine balancing act like you're talking about, that we are able to have both with really well written policies, well implemented policies, and well monitored policies.
Oh, you just love the policies. You just love them. It makes you
That's it.
happy. I can see it. All
Totally.
right. So let's talk. So after 2015, you win the gold with nationals. Then what did you do? What was the next step?
So it was a great experience all in all at nationals, being able to meet people from all across the country, from all the different provinces and territories. It actually been the first time that I had ever interacted with some people from some specific provinces and territories myself. So that was really great to see how skills brought everybody together. And I really wanted to still be involved in the skills ecosystem afterwards. So I was really fortunate to have been asked by Ontario to be Ontario's representative on the Essential Skills Youth Forum in 2016, where as part of the mandate of that forum, we were building out the framework for, as I understand it, what would eventually become the Skills Canada National Alumni Committee, which is really neat to sort of be involved in it from when it was initially starting.
Inception,
And
yeah.
exactly. So I was involved in, Ontario representative capacity in 2016. I had the privilege of being invited back in 2017 to be a team leader for the 2017 Essential Skills Youth Forum. And then in the years that followed, I did a number of different speaking engagements with Skills Ontario and with Skills Canada, some mentorship opportunities. And then last year in 2022, in March, the president and CEO of Skills Ontario approached me to be the president of the Skills Ontario Alumni Association, a position which I very gratefully accepted, and I've been on the association in that capacity ever since.
Awesome. So when I ran into you last year, because now we've caught up to date, what was your role then? Was it the same role you have now?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, same role. And ever since, I think that in the year that's passed, the initial year was focused mostly on, understanding the work that had been done to date in the portfolio, and then also understanding what each of the different provinces and territories are doing in their own respective portfolios. And I think that this year is really focused on now implementing programs to see about bringing value to each of our alumni groups within Skills Ontario. And as I understand it, other provinces and territories are also going to be implementing similar programs to what we're piloting in Ontario in the future, which is really cool to see.
So, when you look at your path now, from grade 12, you just, scratch the surface of what this thing ends up being, an 8-year journey, of being involved, whether you're a competitor, mentor, advisor, whatever it is, and to your position now. What's one of the overarching themes that you've had to work within, in terms of your skills, your essential skills, your growth throughout this whole process?
I think the key essential skill that's come through most for me is communication. That if you master the skill of communication, and that's not to say that I've mastered the skill of communication, it's always a sort of a constant, ever evolving process. But I find that communication is easily the thing that can set you up best for success. Again, in my experience, communication was really integral to me succeeding in 2015, because such a huge portion of what our competition was based on was being able to effectively communicate who you are and the risks that you identified. And then all the way through, right, when you're going to be engaging with other provinces and territories, you want to make sure that you're both communicating your values properly, but also listening well, actively listening to the other people's perspectives around the table. And then moving into now more of an executive type role within the Alumni Association in Ontario. The same thing applies, right? Being able to be with you here today, communication is critical in order for this to go really well and be set up for success. And then in other ways as well, it's just communication, and then dovetailed with communication, collaboration are the two things that I think have best seen me through this time, all in all.
And then, you have the skills life, but you also have real life, because this is not like your paying gig, right? So after high school, what did you take? You went off to university? Did you go to trade school? What did you do? And did you pursue that path that workplace safety kind of led you in?
So I was really considering it actively, and I think I was probably going to go into it. I was debating between sort of essentially one of three different paths at that time. The first path was going into university and pursuing my love of public policy and figuring out how government works. The second path was pursuing trade school and going into understanding workplace safety in a more sort of air quotes practical sense of being able to then become a workplace safety consultant or workplace safety advisor, which I would have loved, or going into entrepreneurship. I've always loved entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So it was difficult to choose one of the three. I ended up going with the public policy route just because I really wasn't expecting to be accepted into the House of Commons PAGE program, because as I understand it, it's really difficult to get into. And so when I got that offer, and you're only able to apply for it the one time for your first year of university, and if you don't accept it, then you can't get the opportunity a second time. And that was also the year when we were foreseeing that there was potentially going to be a changeover of government on the federal front, which was going to be really interesting for a lot of different reasons. Again, mentioning that in a nonpartisan capacity, but still, nonetheless, it was very interesting for a political junkie. So I chose the path of public policy, and I think that even though I didn't go into workplace safety and workplace safety consulting and advising as a career path, if anything, actually, I think it still really supported me in my overall professional development. And it's still, you're still able to affect workplace safety policies outside of being a workplace safety consultant or advisor, especially if you're going sort of the more macro level of going into trying to figure out how to affect the public policies that govern workplace safety. That was the approach that I ended up ultimately taking, was to try and see, okay, well, how can we have the biggest impact on bettering workplace safety regulations for all workers writ large? And I saw public policy as a nice way to be able to bridge those two.
No, that's a very defined niche, job role you're chasing there. You're going to spend 4 years in university studying policy writing, that whole spectrum of documentation world, to come out and you have a job in sight. Realistically, how many of those jobs are there in Canada? Realistically, what's the opportunity for you to graduate and find that job and get to work and make some money?
Yeah, so I think that ultimately that's one of the things that has been most, shall I say, sobering in the future is, when I was going through high school, just sort of zooming back out for a second, in high school, I was really grateful to have had a lot of great advisors that have helped me to find my way. That being said, though, I wish that it was more actively promoted to me that, not only is a career in the skilled trades a really fulfilling and exciting career to have, it's also a really high paying career to have. And that wasn't necessarily emphasized as much as I wish that it was. If it was advertised more in that way, I probably would have gone into it, I think, actually.
Yeah.
Because now, I have so many friends who have chosen to enter into the trades, and good God, they're making a ton of money. They're feeling really fulfilled every day.
My brother is a safety officer consultant, and he's doing very well.
There we go. So yeah, all in all, I think that for anybody who's listening to the podcast right now and who's considering, okay, well, maybe I want to have a career change, maybe I'm interested in exploring what career is best for me, and there's any inclination of maybe I want to explore a career in the trades, I would highly recommend just go for it. Just do it. It's not a ton of time to be able to, test the waters and go through the educational path. It's really cost effective. You end up having, in my experience, nowhere near the amount of money that you have to be putting out for a full 4-year undergrad, and you end up getting an amazing, high paying job really quickly after graduation, right? And that job is guaranteed for life once you're in that position, right? So I would say don't let the stigmas that still unfortunately tend to persist, which I'm actively trying to figure out ways of how we can make those stigmas go away. And one of the best ways I think that we can do that is by having honest, fact-based conversations about how the skilled trades are, able to offer really viable career paths for everybody, or for a lot of people. But don't let those stigmas dissuade you from wanting to pursue a career in the trades, because it's a great choice.
So then you finished your undergrad, right? And
Totally.
How'd it go?
It went well. I graduated as valedictorian of my class and president of my class. So all in all, I think objectively it went pretty much as well as it could have gone. And I feel really grateful all along the way to have made amazing friendships with a lot of people that I'm still really, really close to this day.
And were you able to find a job with your undergrad in what you wanted to do?
So short answer is yes. I ended up going into the regulated health sector instead. So I went into more pharmaceutical-based companies to a pharmaceutical-based startup. And I love that because the background in public policy was really helpful to understand the regulatory frameworks that we were operating within. Very similar to, if you're going to be going into workplace safety consulting, understanding the regulatory frameworks governing workplace safety, regulations. The same sorts of skills that I started to learn within Skills Canada and Skills Ontario were very, very helpful when I ended up going on to working in the regulated industries. But yeah, so short answer is I did, and I could have gotten one to become, for instance, a policy advisor with the Crown Corporation. I just didn't necessarily want to go that path post-graduation. I more wanted to go into the private sector.
And now, what's the educational journey? Are you done? Are you going to work now as a worker bee the rest of your life? Or you don't seem like the type of person to do that, but or are you eyeing up some more education?
So I ended up enrolling at the Smith School of Business at Queen's University in August of last year. Was when my coursework started in their Masters of Innovation, Management, and Entrepreneurship program. It's a really exceptional program, and the whole sort of raison d'être of that program is to churn out people who are able to add value to organizations and who are able to find ways to innovate older systems. And that's one of the things that I've always loved ever since I was really, really young. I've always loved playing with Lego. I've always loved writing music. I've always loved, playing music and writing poetry and all those sorts of things. So it gave me an amazing outlet for that creative expression, while also being able to get really a world-class understanding of how business works and how to operate effectively within the private sector. So the undergrad was really great for understanding the public sector really well. Now graduate degree is focusing really well on how to understand the private sector. So in the future, it would be great to enter more passionately into social entrepreneurship. I think that that's where a big passion lies for me. While at the same
You want to bring the co-ops back? Is that what you want to do?
I would love that. That'd be really cool. But yeah, all in all, though, I think that the future is still being charted, but will definitely lie somewhere at the intersection between the public sector and the private sector.
Well, being creative in the business world is one of the hardest things to find. Business has a tendency to want to not change it. It's a very self-protected entity, whether it's big or small. It's and everyone talks about innovation, and I now, because I used to teach in college an innovation class, and the course I taught was called Innovative Manufacturing. Basically, don't reinvent the wheel. Let's just find ways to innovate systems that we have now to make them better. And there's always a million ideas as soon as you ask the right people, but you never ask the right people. Right? You ask all the eggheads at the top that actually have no idea how the system works, and they have no idea what to do because from their end, they're just like, I just need 3% more, and however that happens, it happens, right? But that creativity that exists within, I would say, the arts community, within the people that tend to be seen as sort of out there, is exactly what business needs. Is they need those free thinkers. You need to empower the people with the weird ideas, because that's where the innovation lies. It's on the outliers, right? And I think that that's wonderful that you're pursuing that. And I don't know if you're going to be able to avoid entrepreneurialism for very long just from talking to you. I was never able to avoid it for very long. I always had to be like, you know what? No one's going to let me do what I want. I'm going to have to just do it myself, right? Because then I could, I failed many times because you do, that's life, but it was still wonderful to learn, and they made me a better business manager in general. And it's often, and not a nice thing I say to people sometimes when I'm mad, if I'm frustrated with somebody in business, I'll say, have you ever made $1 for yourself? There's a difference between you making $1 for yourself and making $1 for somebody else, and then they pay you. Because when you have a paycheck, that's very safe. When that $1 you're making for yourself, that's another story. And then you find out how good you are at business. You know what I mean? Like, it's very easy to spend somebody else's money.
It's so true. Yeah.
So what's the long-term vision for yourself with Skills then? We charted your future with your business and your education. Your Skills has led you up to here where you are. And do you see a parallel path going forward with these two? Could they intersect? Could you perhaps see yourself working at Skills in a paid position, perhaps in what they do, or is that off the books? Or have you thought about those things?
Absolutely, yeah. So I would say nothing's off the books for now. Certainly open to seeing wherever the future takes me. And if that's in the cards, then absolutely, I'd love to have that conversation. That sounds great. I think that ultimately, regardless of whether that ends up happening or not, skills will always be in my passenger seat or in the driver's seat, depending on where I am.
Mhm.
But it's going to be happening. It's something that's happening in parallel for I could see a very long time in my
Few
professional
years, yeah.
life.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because it's just really nice to be able to. I've been so grateful to have benefited so much from skills, and I really credit it with playing a huge part in my overall professional development in a bunch of different areas. And
Mhm.
it's beautiful that it's baked into skills the idea of giving back and making sure that you can create those same circumstances for success that you were able to realize for the next generation. That's the reason why I love being a part of it. So in the future, even if I'm not working at Skills in a paid capacity, I feel more than happy still being involved in the capacity that I'm in right now, and in other
Mhm.
ways, of course. But finding ways to add more value to the people who are going through the programs, skills programs, is something that is just really exciting. So I definitely hope that continues into the future.
Well, and when you go to Skills, look around the room. There's lots and lots of people, myself included, we're in 40s, 50s, coming up into 60s. Some and they like we've drank the juice. Once you're in, you're kind of in forever. And
Totally.
you love seeing the passing off of experience, the mentorship. Nothing makes me happier than having a young welder come up to me and ask me a question about what could I do here, what could I do there. It's like you get to put that mentor hat on and be like, yeah, let me help you. And you see them soak that information in at the skills level. By the time people are at a competition for skills, they care. They
Absolutely.
care. It's a captive audience. And as an instructor for so many years, not everyone in your class cares. It doesn't matter if you're university, college, training program, there's going to be a whole subset of students that are just there to get through because they have to do it and they just want to move on. But then there's going to be the students that really, really, give a hoot. When you're at skills, it's all give a hoots,
It's
right?
so
Like
true.
it's all give a hoots. Like everyone there has a hoot to give. So they are involved, and that's a great feeling to be surrounded by all these people from you see these like 14-year-olds to 60-year-olds with the same passion, and it's really beautiful.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, and I think that the diversity across the age spectrums that's the best part about it, right? Is that especially for people like when I was really young, I always tended to hang out with people who were a little bit older than me for one reason or another, like whatever that was. And skills really creates an environment where that can happen, right? In fact, that's actually encouraged because then if you want to go for it and you want to learn from somebody who has more experience than you, then they say, yeah, well, here's a platform where you can do it. So no, that's one of my favorite parts about it, and couldn't agree more. That's easily, yeah, it's something that I like the most about the organizations too.
Awesome. So coming up to the end of the interview here, for someone that's like yourself, that's out there and is public. I wouldn't say public policy minded, but politically minded. And there is I am a very political. We've had this conversation. I grew up in a politicized home. It's always been something that's important to me, and there's not a lot of us out there that are politically minded forever. Like just the way we look at the world. I went to university for philosophy, which is not a shocker to anyone that knows me. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So what would you say to someone who's young and is interested in politics? And it's not a cool thing to be interested in politics right now. It really isn't. And they have this understanding that they want to contribute, and they understand that politics might be a way to go. What's a motivating factor for yourself that you were able to use throughout your career now? What was a motivating factor for yourself that might be translatable to somebody else?
It sounds really cheesy to say it, but politics really, regardless of whether politics is perfect or not, which it is most certainly not perfect, it's supposed to be the one thing that really brings us all together. And especially in a democracy like what we're known for having in Canada, at least for sure, historically speaking, and more recently, that's come into more question as of late, which I think is really sad to see where the dialogue's gone recently. But my point being, um, politics is what we make it. So if we're interested in politics, it's really easy to get involved, right? We're getting involved with in a community level, even, right? That was how I first got involved with politics. Yeah, I had my eyes set on the federal front for sure, but it was at Ottawa City Hall that I first got interested, right? In understanding the different opportunities that were there for youth. Like in Ottawa, we have the Ottawa Youth Engagement Committee. So I joined that committee as soon as I found out about it, because I wanted to figure out, okay, well, what opportunities lie for me in my city, in my community, to become involved in the political ecosystem. And youth engagement committees are fairly widespread. They're available across the country. And I would highly, highly recommend that any youth who are passionate about politics, or even not necessarily politics, but who are just passionate about sort of chipping in and doing their part for the community, I would highly recommend that they look at those organizations as a first foray. And maybe over time, hopefully, they'll develop a love of just doing good for the world, as opposed to, a love of just politics, right? Because politics can be so divisive. But if we just focus on doing good for the world, then I think that ultimately we'll all be a little bit better off.
I love that statement. And people often ask me why I show so much interest in politics, and they use the word divisive a lot. And I said, well, the only way to finish a job is to divide it into pieces. So, maybe it is divisive, but is that a bad thing? Maybe we should be looking at this a little bit more holistically, that, okay, maybe it is divisive, but let's look at where that line that cracked, and maybe that is an essential point. Maybe that's an essential variable to look at in terms of why that crack exists right there. And that's a starting point for correction. You know what I mean? So it's,
Absolutely.
And that's just my weird way of looking at things. So
No, I love it. I love it. That's great. Always will be falling on kind ears with me. That's awesome.
All right, Sam. Well, thank you very much. Any shout outs? Anything you want to say to anybody? This is your free mic talk.
Oh, well, no, I just want to say thanks again so much, Max, for this opportunity, and a sincere thanks again to everybody at Skills Compétences Canada, and also to the team at Skills Ontario for being such incredible supports throughout this whole process. And I'm really looking forward to keeping the conversation going and having more conversations with other people at Winnipeg in a few weeks.
Awesome. I'll see you there. And for all the people that have been following along, thank you so much for being a part and listening to this wonderful series that we're doing with Skills Canada. It's going to be very, very cool. If you just happen to stumble across this one, there's about 15 of them. So check them all out. We go across the country, including some of the brass from Skills National. And if this is, if you've been following the series from the start, stay tuned. We still got a few more. And please share, download, comment. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, and what you'd like to see come from both Skills and the CWB Association. We're more than happy to work with you and any ideas that come in. Sam, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks again so much, Max. Take care.
All right, take care.
We hope you enjoyed the show.